Hey, future lawyer. Welcome to the LSAT Simplified podcast presented by Hey Future Lawyer, where we talk about all things LSAT, law school admissions, and otherwise. If you want to check out our free LSAT course, go to heyfuturelawyer.com to sign up for a free account today. Hey, folks. So today we have a bit of a mailbag episode. I have a bunch of questions that have been sent in, so we're just going to go through them. Kind of a lot of shorter questions for what it's worth. But because the podcast is picking up on the airwaves and there are more and more of you listening, I'm getting more of you talking to me, which is exciting. And don't worry, I'm not getting too ahead of myself. I know that I'm still functionally an internet nobody, but I have my own little mild LSAT fame among you all. So anyways, we have a few things, starting with one person. They email me and say, hey, man, hope all is well. I just wanted your 2 cents on if I should take April. Now, upon talking about this, the April test has passed. So I'm a little late on this, but I responded to them via email, and it's more about the overall idea of this person's situation and whether or not similar things apply to yours. So they're considering taking April. My average over my last 8 prep tests is about a 169, but my goal is 175 plus. So immediately, I would say it's probably not going to happen if you're averaging a 169, but you want a 175. The math is pretty straightforward. Like pretty clearly, your average is not where you want to be. That being said, let's see what you have. They say, I have a 4.1 LSAT GPA, which is kind of irrelevant to whether or not you take April, but it's good. Like, that definitely helps with your applications. I guess that also makes me wonder, why do you need a 175? If you have a 4.1, there's no reason that you need to be above median. I mean, if you're at median, what's Yale's median? Isn't Yale's median like a 175, which is the top LSAT median in the country? Let's actually look this up real quick. So Yale's 509 report, yeah, it's a 174. So if you're at a 174 or above, it literally doesn't matter because you're already above on GPA. So I'm wondering why you think you need a 175. They care about medians. And I mean, like, I guess they care a little bit more about where you're at, but realistically, they don't. Like, once you're above 174, there's no point. Like, you've hit 174. So anyways, you say you've only taken it once and got a 167. So you have 4 official attempts left. Your last 8 PTs have been 163, 164, 174, 177, 164, 168, 169, 174. That is a wild range. That's a 14-point range. I usually yell at people for thinking they have way too narrow of a range. That is an oddly large range. I'm wondering how you can hit a 177, but also a 163, because the 163 is missing like 20 questions. A 177 is missing like no questions. And the fact that you have multiple 164s in there also, because you have 3 sub 165s out of your 8 takes. I mean, how long have you taken these PTs? Because this is really weird data. Usually people tend to underestimate their range. Your range is huge, like 14 points. That's weird. So I guess the first question is, how long has it been since you've taken all those PTs? So that being said, 1, 2, 3 of your 8 takes are scores that are at median for literal Yale Law School, the top law school in the country, or above, which means you have almost a 50% chance of, if you get what you get on your PTs on April, then you'll get that high score. So what I would do is I would take the test several times, take April, take June, take August, and then the odds of that 3/8 compounds. So not to do the math, but the way the math would work is the odds of you getting a score you like is 3/8, which means the odds of you getting a score you don't like is 5/8. So on one take, the odds of you getting a score you don't like is 5/8. The odds of getting a score you don't like twice, like let's say you take it in April, the odds of you getting a score you don't like is about 60%. But if you then take it in August, it's now a 40% chance that you have a score you don't like. And then, assuming that you take it a third time, you now have a 75% chance of having a 174 or above. If you take it 4 times, you have an 85% chance of getting a score that you want. And this is assuming that you don't improve in those many months that you'd be studying. Presumably, you'd be improving. So I would take the test. What else do we have? She continues, my goal is to apply next cycle, and I plan on using all 4 attempts. So if I take April, June, August, September, I'd be done by September 24, if I need to use that last attempt as a worst case scenario. Or alternatively, I can do June, August, September, October, and be done by October 2024. October 2025, presumably. Yeah, I think it's a fine plan. I mean, I don't think either are bad, because realistically, you're probably going to be done earlier, no matter which plan you do. I guess at this point, you've already taken, but yeah. She asked, do you think applying in September, October makes a difference for scholarships? No, not if you have a 174 4.1. Like, yeah, applying later, it does like theoretically matter. But where this really manifests is when you're applying past Thanksgiving, at least what I see. And further, if you're overqualified, you're overqualified. And with a 4.1, 174, which is where it looks like you're going to be, basically, they're not going to care that you apply in October. You're going to be fine. So anyways, that's her deal. All right, next question we have from someone in class. And they say, hey, Ben, hope all is well. I am emailing you to ask your opinion on wrong answer journals. I've seen some people in their LSAT prep keeping journals of answers they got wrong, writing down why they picked the answer they did, why the correct answer is right, etc. I was curious what your thoughts on this were. Do you think it's a good idea? Best wishes, so-and-so. So yeah, anyways, what do I think about wrong answer journals? Basically, they're not bad, but they're also not the hype that people make them out to be. A wrong answer journal as a concept is okay, but not because of what it is, but because of what it forces you to do. A wrong answer journal forces you to review thoroughly, and that's what I care about. I want you to get into your LSAT questions and really figure out why you got them right and why you got them wrong, because that is incredibly crucial, and a lot of people don't do that. And so that's where a wrong answer journal can come in, because it forces you to slow down and really think about what you did just by the act of writing it down and filling out the journal. Now, that being said, do you need a journal to do that process? Do you need to actually write things down to have gone through that review process to an adequate standard? I don't think so. I never had a journal and I did fine because I actually held myself to a high standard. So it can get you there. I would argue it's sufficient, but not necessary, not to LSAT language it. But yeah, a wrong answer journal, does it hurt? Like, no, not at all. And I think for some people, it can force you to review in a way that a lot of people don't. Because realistically speaking, a lot of you don't review as well as you should. It's one of the hardest things that you all need to recognize, which is that doing questions is very much so a diagnosis process. And that where you actually get better is in that review and figuring out what happens. So doing a question is necessary to get better, but it doesn't actually get you much better. All it does is show you what you don't understand. And that is very valuable because it gives you something to clean up. But you then have to actually do the cleanup. Just doing questions and getting them wrong doesn't do much for you. It's that cleanup of, oh, fuck, I didn't understand this. What did I not understand? That's where you get better. And then further, you also need to understand, like, I didn't understand this. Too many folks just are like, oh, it's the LSAT is stupid. At which point, good luck. Because with that level of humility, you're just not going to get better. I promise you, I have wanted to bang my head into a wall on LSAT questions. Not much recently, but many days in the past I had, when I was studying many, many moons ago, now that I'm old. But basically, you got to review. So wrong answer journals, yeah, I'd say overall, I'd say ambivalent on whether or not you use them. You can use them. You can also not use them. Also, ambivalent is a word that I don't really use, but it isn't my vocab because the LSAT uses it a lot, so I'll touch on it real quick. Ambivalent means wishy-washy. Like, I don't have strong feelings one way or the other. So your crazy uncle who didn't vote, which, you could argue is me, wink, wink, nod, nod. I kid, of course. But they would be ambivalent about, like, the outcome of the election. It's not that I guess, like, apathetic almost. Apathetic kind of, it's a slightly different connotation. Ambivalent is just like you don't care. Whereas I think apathetic kind of has that connotation of like you should care, but you don't. Like maybe you'll be apathetic to voting results, but maybe ambivalent to whether or not you get Chipotle or Subway. And I could be wrong about that, but apathetic seems to have that connotation of like what is like you should care. Whereas I think with ambivalent, it's not about such weighty things. Like you might be apathetic about death, you might be apathetic about like genocide, but you wouldn't be ambivalent. Ambivalent would be, I think it's lower stakes. Anyways, very common LSAT word, which is why I used it for this discussion of wrong answer journals. And in wrong answer journals, like we talked about, they can be useful. However, there is a usage where people go off the rails in wrong answer journals, and that is when they start looking for patterns. Because like, first off, don't look for patterns. See what questions you got wrong, figure them out. Often people, and there's a great book on this called Fooled by Randomness, where we as humans are really good at finding patterns, even when they don't exist. So often people will be like, I always miss question 7. And I'm like, fucking, you don't though. You're just bad at the LSAT. You miss a lot of questions and you happen to have missed 7. Or alternatively, like I always do bad at necessary assumption questions. And it's like, okay, you do, but that's not because you suck at this question. It's because there's a shit ton of them. And when there's a lot of them, you're going to make issues. And then further, let's even assume that you are bad at this question type and that this is an actual thing. Like there is something to it and you do misunderstand something. You're going to do that in the review process regardless. So looking for patterns doesn't help you. Like even if the patterns are there, which they might be, like, because I'll acknowledge patterns can exist. There can be things going on where like you don't understand something. But here's the thing, you're going to get that in your review process anyways. So the whole like looking for patterns or analytics is totally meaningless because if you're doing your review process as you should, the patterns will sort themselves out because you're going to run into those questions. And then the real issue is when people start seeing patterns that aren't there, and then they start like, I'd say focusing on the way they're studying as opposed to just actually doing the studying. It's like your friend who, I guess, comes up with like the craziest workout plan and the craziest diet plan instead of just going to the gym and eating less food. It's like, I'm not saying that you can't have really complicated plans and it's fine, but you don't want it to get in the way of actually doing the work. And too many people let their wrong answer journal get in the way of doing the work. And then further, this is where it really goes off the rails. People will visit back to the wrong answer journal a week or two later. Don't fucking do that. Review better the first time. If you need to reference back to a question in your wrong answer journal, it means you didn't understand it and you didn't do the work the first time. And yeah, I know that's often frustrating because like maybe sitting with a question will take you 30 minutes. Maybe you need to find an explanation. And this is where like getting help is good. Like obviously, if you work with us, you can get access to explanations just on demand. And if the ones that we have are not adequate, you can just send a request in and we'll get back to you. So that is the upside to working with someone. But you got to sit with it. You got to struggle. Like reviewing a question is not a 30-second process. It will often be a 10, 15, 20-minute, 30-minute process of like what is happening in this question. And you have to sit with it and you have to chew on it. But if you do that, then you don't have to come back to it. And if you are often like coming back to questions like, I don't understand that, but I reviewed it, then you didn't review it well enough. Because if you reviewed it well enough, you would have figured it out and you would have learned from it. So yeah, overall, very short verdict, wrong answer journals, fine. Also, people tend to, it's like a lot of things LSAT that I complain about, like formal logic, question types, that sort of shit. It's not that it's not real. It's that people use it in the wrong way. And by using it in the wrong way, I tend to dislike it. Like, I mean, not to come back to formal logic, but I'm not a big fan of formal logic. I think formal logic is totally unnecessary on the LSAT. The LSAT has relatively simple logic, as in logic that a smart seventh grader would be expected to understand. Conditional logic is not hard. I don't know why people think conditional logic is hard. I mean, it is hard when it's taught to you in a very complex way of like, oh, the sufficient relies on the necessary and like the necessary doesn't. I mean, I don't even fucking know it because I don't get it, but I understand it conceptually. So I don't have to understand the logical rules because like I understand what words mean. And by understanding what words mean, you understand what conditions mean. So anyways, and formal logic is not false. Like a proper understanding of it does help, I guess. But my issue with formal logic is that if you can understand formal logic, you can understand the words. And if you can't understand the words, the formal logic isn't going to save you. Because often the people that really like formal logic are the people that really suck at the LSAT and they're looking for like the shortcuts to the task of like, oh, you just throw in these like symbols and now you can just see the answer. But the thing is, anyone who can adequately translate them into symbols already understands what it means. And if you can't and if you can't understand what it means, the symbols are not going to save you because you don't understand what's going on. So formal logic, and I guess where this helps is someone who has it in them to understand it, but will only slow down if they force themselves to put it into symbols. And for that person, formal logic might be doing it. The other way to get past it would be to grow up and just understand what you're reading without forcing yourself to put it into symbols. Because if you are forcing yourself to put it in symbols to understand, like fun fact, if you're diagramming shit out in contracts, your clients are going to laugh at you. Anyways, kind of a tangent, but long story short, wrong answer journals, fine. Just, be careful with them. All right, what else do we have? So yeah, we have a few other questions. Let me pull them up. So the first question is, yeah, someone asked me like what factors should drive a student's calendar choice of like when I should take the LSAT. And I told this person basically, hey, when you take the LSAT, this is not very sexy advice, but it's really the only useful advice, is driven by one thing and one thing only, and that is, are you ready? Now, that being said, you can aim for a date. Let's say you want to apply this fall. You should be aiming to take the LSAT soon. You should be aiming for August or September. But whether or not you actually take those tests is only dependent upon where are your practice test scores. Because if you want to apply this cycle, but you're scoring 135, there's no fucking point in taking August or September because you're not ready. And even if you want to apply, you're still not going to be ready because a 135 isn't going to get you in either. So the really only thing that matters is, are you ready to take the test? Now, people often register before they study. I don't understand I do understand why people do it because they think it's not that big of a deal. The LSAT actually is kind of a big deal. So it actually is kind of hard to study for and it takes you a while. But what I would say is, and if you've made that mistake in the past, it is what it is because like you didn't know better. But now that you've heard, you do know better. So if you make that mistake, now you're a dummy because now you're actively choosing to do this in spite of knowing the better way. The better way is prep and then register when you're ready. Throw the deadlines on your calendar so that you can pay attention to like, oh, today's the August deadline. Am I ready? And then if you are ready, you register. And if you're not, you don't. It's that simple. Anything else will likely lead you to disappointment. I will caveat that, of course, some people can study and have the test date already coming up on them. Like they decided to study for a date they predetermined that they were going to take. Like I'm just like, I'm taking August. Fuck it. I'm doing it no matter what. That can work out. That doesn't mean it's a good plan. Just because it can work doesn't mean that it will work for most people. But what will work for everyone is studying and then taking the test once you're ready. Now, this does often mean that you have to adjust your timeline because the LSAT timelines can take a while. And if you, like, let's say you start studying now, it is April, the end of April as of filming this. If you take 6 months, we're going to be in the end of October. So I guess you could kind of apply this year. But starting soon, people that are going to take longer are going to be pushed next cycle. And I know that's crazy because we're still months out from applications opening, but that's how law school applications work, which is why you all need to get going so much earlier than you do. Anyways, the basic point is take when you're ready. They continue though. How does a June versus August versus October test study? Sorry, Jesus, I can't read. How does taking June versus August versus October affect my study pace and mental bandwidth during the school year? Well, first off, prioritize school first. If you're in undergrad, you need to get the best GPA that you can. Your GPA is forever. The LSAT will always be waiting for you. It's not going anywhere. It's actually funny, total tangent, but going back a couple years, they thought they were going to get rid of the LSAT. Starting in 2025, the LSAT was supposed to be optional. How'd that work out? You test optional goofballs. I kid, of course, but I mean, I also kind of dance on the grave of the test optional movement because, well, do I go down this road? The more I teach standardized tests, specifically the LSAT, the more I realize that there's a lot of value to the LSAT. If I were going to hire a lawyer, I would not hire someone who could not score 170 untimed, which basically all of you have access to untimed conditions because you can get accommodations, is what I'm trying to say. And that 70 minutes is basically untimed, realistically, because it's so much time for the amount of questions that you have to answer. And if you can't score 170 untimed, I wouldn't hire you as my lawyer because I don't trust your command of the English language. Like, if you can't understand the conditions on the LSAT, I don't want you understanding conditions on my contract with like my employees or with other businesses. I just wouldn't trust it. So I can say as someone who would hire lawyers, I would not hire someone with a low LSAT score. And people, I guess, don't like that when they hear that because it sounds elitist, but also like, fun fact, I am an elitist when I'm coming to who I want to hire. I want kick-ass people. I don't want average people that are going to fuck up. I want people that are going to get it done and not cause me to get sued by my employees because they left out some clause that they should have caught, or they left some loophole that now my employees can exploit to like sue me. So anyways, I will say that the LSAT is not irrelevant from what I see. What I see is that this is a test that very much so matters. It correlates very heavily with work ethic. It correlates very heavily with raw power in terms of English language, which also, like, what do you think lawyers do? Lawyers are gladiators in the English language. They use these words to fight each other. And as such, I want someone who understands what words mean. And that is what the LSAT is. So if you don't understand what words mean, I don't think you're going to be as good of a lawyer. That being said, I think people can get low LSAT scores and still be decent lawyers, but that's because they either grew in their abilities or alternatively, they didn't study that hard and it was always in them. They just never actually brought it out of themselves. But if someone truly cannot get to a high LSAT score, even with really hard work, I'm concerned. Like, I wouldn't hire that person because I don't think they're ready to go into this battle. It's like, would you hire someone who's 5'1" to go play in the NBA? I'm not saying that person is lesser of value, but I am saying they are lesser value in this competition. And this competition is a competition of words and what they mean. And the LSAT is a competition of words and what they mean. So yeah, the more I do LSAT, the more I realize like I would not hire anyone below 170 to work for me. If I was running a law school, I probably wouldn't admit anyone below a 160 to come to my law school. That would be my cutoff for like, I just don't think that you belong here. And I know that sounds harsh and I know that sounds elitist, but that's what I see from people I work with. And, I send people to law school with below that. I tend to really yell at people. And by yell at people, I mean, give my opinion on their situation, whether or not they want it, if they're sub 155. Because if someone's sub 155, I'm genuinely concerned about their understanding. Or alternatively, I'm concerned about their work ethic. But to score low on the LSAT, one thing must be true. Either you didn't do the work or you don't understand, both of which are going to be a problem. Because if you didn't do the work on this very serious test, then how are you going to do the work on more serious things like law school exams, which are higher stakes than the LSAT? Like, you all realize your 1L like finals in your fall semester are going to likely determine the course of your career. For all of you going to big law or with big law aspirations, that one set of tests, that 1 week will determine your career. If you do well, you might get big law interviews. If you don't, you might not. I mean, this is dependent at the school you're at. At some schools, it doesn't matter how hard you kill it, you're not getting the interviews. At some schools, you can really fuck up, like Harvard, and you're still going to get good interviews. But at most schools, like at the majority, if you crush it, you're going to get the interviews. And if you don't, you're not. Game over. Your career's, well, not your career's over, but these, I guess, ways that your career could have gone are over. And that is really high stakes. The LSAT is not that. You can take the LSAT whenever you're ready. If you break up with your boyfriend or girlfriend, you can just reschedule. If you aren't ready, you can reschedule. Like, you can retake it if it doesn't go well. Like, none of these things are true of law school exams. You take it the day they are scheduled, period. End of career. If you have a breakup and you're just mentally not there. Further, you can't retake them. They don't go well, can't retake. On the LSAT, you can retake. Not a big deal. Try again. Law school exams? No way. So like, this only gets harder. And then the bar exam is so much harder. Like, genuinely, if you hate the LSAT, please look up a bar exam question because it is so much harder than the LSAT. And just in terms of like the density of the text, how much more they expect you to actually read. Like, if you can't read, which is what low LSAT scores indicate, and by low, I mean like sub 150, this is not the field for you. And I don't mean to be that person, but like, it's genuinely like, I don't know. I don't know what people think lawyers do. It's like, lawyers do English. Are you bad at English? Because if so, this is going to be hard. Anyways, but that was kind of a lot. And then someone says, when is it wiser to and this is the same person. When is it wise to withdraw, cancel, or sit for the score you have, even if it isn't your dream number? I hate that question because it's like, The question is, does it get you the outcomes you want? Does it get you the scholarship offers to the schools that you should go to? Because, for example, maybe you can get into law school with a 151, but it's to like the local law school. You're not going to get any scholarship money. And that's a bummer because like you don't want to attend your local scholarship or your local school on full price. Like that sucks. That's really going to kill you. Alternatively, um, maybe like you're not at your 175, but you're at 165, and you're looking at going to like the University of Idaho, which is a super crappy law school in terms of entry metrics, and you're already at like 155, which is so far and above what they accept. Like with the 155, I just yelled about how 155 shouldn't go to law school, in my opinion. At the University of Idaho, you're like overqualified. You're like their top applicant. So in that case, like what is the point of continuing to study? You're already above what they require. So I would say compared to the schools that you want to go to, if you are applying to all the schools in the country, then you need to go until you reach your potential, whatever that may be. If you are stuck to your school, the question is, have you exceeded the best offer that the school will give you? As in, are you above their 75th percentile? If not, I would keep going. Otherwise, like I think stopping early on the LSAT is just such baby shit. Like it's like go further. It's not that crazy. You just got to go deeper. Like some of you just do not do the work and you need to do the work. I don't understand why I do understand why you don't. Humans are lazy and humans want to take shortcuts, but these shortcuts fuck you guys over. Like you do realize that if you decide not to take the LSAT serious, it costs you serious money. Like these are not small amounts of money that you're foregoing when you rip the Band-Aid off early. It's like, oh, I'm done. That was fun. Oh yeah. Anyways, so this was a shorter one just because I don't have a lot to talk about. I'm gonna throw in a reading comp passage from the prep test 123. It's Madeline and I talking through it. So we're gonna read through the passage, then we're gonna go through all the questions. It'll make this one really long. Honestly, it's a lot higher value than most of this podcast, realistic, because like we're actually talking through LSAT questions. I would give it a listen. You should see how easy the LSAT can be when you do it that way. And yeah, I hope you enjoy that. Off to her and I in the past, I guess. In a recent court case, a copy shop owner was accused of violating copyright law when in the preparation of course packs, materials photocopied from books and journals and packaged as readings for particular university courses, he copied materials without obtaining permission from or paying sufficient fees to the publishers.
Okay, so it looks like so far we're just given a little bit of context of or some background of a court case that's probably going to segue into the overall issue that will be being discussed in the passage, likely to do with law, copyright law, specifically in the case of these course packs, which I think if you've been a university student, I think it's easy to conceptualize what they're referring to here. I don't know about you, Ben, but when I was in school, sometimes we would have something like this where the professor would give us like readings and they were all from different sources. So that's sort of what I think of when they mention this.
Yeah, so we have this owner of this, I guess it's like a Kinko, it's probably a local one, they say coffee shop. And he knows he's by this university and he knows that maybe like Econ 101, the professor is obnoxious and makes people buy like five $200 textbooks and then only assigns a few readings from each. And he's like, hey, kiddos, you don't want to buy these $1,000 of textbooks? Just come here. I'll sell you the readings that you actually have and I'll give it to you for like $200. I can see how the professor might not be stoked about this because often I think they get kickbacks from the publishers or they buy their own textbooks. So he's kind of undercutting the university here, or at least undercutting the textbook publisher. So I can see where the impetus to sue this guy comes from, which is like, hey, he's cutting into our grift we have going on with these textbooks. Let's shut this guy down.
Yeah, because it's the coffee shop owner who's doing coffee shop, not coffee shop owner who's doing this, not like from the professor themselves or something. I would sometimes have courses where the book we would have to read would be like written by the professor. I don't know if you ever had that situation.
Oh, often. It's like $20. But yeah, so as we continue though, I'm always kind of thinking ahead. It's like what I'm left wondering at this point is what happens? Like, does he win? Does he lose? Maybe what is the law that this is based on?
Yeah, what's the implication of this case? Does it set a certain precedent or something like that?
All right, let's see what they tell us. They say, as the owner of 5 small coffee shops serving several educational institutions in the area, he argued, as have others in the photocopy business, that the current process for obtaining permissions is time-consuming, cumbersome, and expensive.
So this is kind of giving the perspective of the copy shop owner. We're just told his rationale, his argument for why he is doing this, or why he's doing this basically without permission. He's kind of doing this technically illegally or in violation of copyright law because the process is just really cumbersome. That's literally what it says.
if I were the lawyer for the textbook companies, I would say just because something's cumbersome does not give you permission to not follow the law. Like you still have to go through our processes. Whether or not you like them, you're still doing copyright infringement.
Yeah,
So
I feel like, filing taxes can be cumbersome. We got to do it,
yeah, Madeline and I would say probably have more complicated taxes than the average bear, given that we don't get like documents. We have to like keep our own records and whatnot. So it is very time consuming, cumbersome, and sometimes expensive, but that does not excuse us from like, sorry, IRS, I didn't file them because it's annoying this year. You still have to do it. So, okay, I'm kind of, I'd say, jaded against this coffee shop owner. It's also worth noting that your opinion as the reader doesn't really matter, but I find that by having an opinion, you're usually more engaged. Like, I feel like I fully
Yeah.
understand what they're saying at this point. Alrighty, let's continue. He also maintained that course packs, which are ubiquitous in higher education, allow professors to assign important readings in books and journals, too costly for students to be expected to purchase individually.
Okay, so here he's kind of appealing to the idea that he sort of claims he's doing the professors a favor, basically, indirectly, by making certain readings more accessible for the students so that the professors can assign these and not feel maybe, I'm projecting a little bit, but guilty about assigning all these things that they would have to buy. I would kind of say the professors probably don't care, but that's that's what the copy shop owner is.
Yeah, and I think that's worth hitting on as far as like you saying you don't care. Because I'd say from a kind of real world perspective, people are often like, actually, this coffee shop owner is doing something good. But on the LSAT and in legal practice, it will just be, does the law apply? And the law here is, did he commit copyright infringement? Not, is he doing a positive thing for the world? You can be doing a positive thing via illegal methods. And I think that's what our coffee shop owner might be doing. So I'd be like, okay, that's nice. Also, we don't care whether or not you're doing this for good. Like the point is you are still committing copyright infringement. But let's see what ends up happening in court because we're still getting context here. And they continue. While the use of copyrighted material for teaching purposes is typically protected by certain provisions of copyright law, this case was unique in that the copying of course packs was done by a copy shop and at a profit.
Okay, so here we're given kind of a crucial distinction about what makes the actions of the copy shop owner problematic legally, because we're told that, there is some sort of scope for doing this. And I actually kind of think to the initial example I had, where I've had in my own experience, professors themselves, photocopying things from books. And that might be an instance where that's okay because they're not trying to profit off of it. They're just trying to get us the materials or something like that. But in this case, they're saying it's unique because it was done by a shop, not by the institution, the university or the faculty, or whatever. And it's not at a profit. So they're, the coffee shop owner, it's interesting because the coffee, I keep saying coffee shop, the coffee shop owner was sort of sounding like he was really altruistic, right? Like, oh, I'm just
Right.
trying to make this more accessible. Like I'm doing this for, the good of the, students, etc. But he's also making a profit. And of course, both things can be true that he's, it is beneficial to the students and he's making a profit. But the idea of that he's benefiting from this seems to be a distinguishing factor that the author is pointing out makes this potentially problematic. I suspect they're
Yeah.
going to maybe elaborate on this.
Well, I tend to agree with our author here, saying like, wait a sec, you say you're doing this for good. Turns out, one, you don't have permission, which I would say kind of the buck stops there. That really is the end of this case from like a legal perspective. But further, even if you did care about the ethical perspective, which I don't because, legal passage, but even if I did, I'd be like, okay, you say you're doing it for good, but you're making money. So are you sure there's not an ulterior motive? And you can have more than
Yeah.
one motive, but it is still like Madeline said, like it raises an eyebrow. It's like, huh, really? Like these things seem to be going contrary to one
Like
another.
if it wasn't profitable, would he still be doing this?
Yeah. So let's see what else they tell us. Maybe because once again, we have this court case. We still don't know what the outcome is. So I'm very much so left like curious, like
I'm
what's going on.
curious. Yeah, I'm curious too, right? We're intrigued.
And this is a just reading comp trick. Try to gaslight yourself into caring. It really will pay
It
wonders for you.
really works. I think for me personally, when I was studying for reading comp at the beginning of my LSAT journey, I was so grouchy about it. And surprise, surprise, I wasn't doing so hot on reading comp. And once I really changed my mindset with it, and again, sort of, would gaslight myself into finding it interesting. I think a lot of times actually it can be interesting, first off, but it really just made a huge difference for how I was performing.
Yeah, like I'm genuinely curious. So let's see what they say. All right, second paragraph. They tell us Copyright law outlines several factors involved in determining whether the use of copyrighted material is protected, including whether it is for commercial or nonprofit purposes, the nature of the copyrighted work, the length and importance of the excerpt used in relation to the entire work, and the effect of its use on the work's potential market value.
Okay, so we're given a bit of a laundry list of certain parameters of copyright law. One of them, I feel like they sort of alluded to the idea of, is it for commercial or nonprofit purposes? We are told for the copy shop it is commercial, like they are trying to profit from it. The nature of the copyrighted work, the length of it, just given a bunch of different factors that go into it. This is, I think, if a great example of something that when I'm reading my passage, I'm not putting a lot of pressure to memorize all of this laundry list of things, but I know if they ask a question about the factors considered in copyright law, I'm like, oh, they mentioned this at the beginning of the second paragraph. I know exactly where to refer back to if I don't remember every single thing.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's like functionally we're humans. You can't memorize the exact words that they say. But what you can remember is we give the conditions, or I guess the relevant factors. We know it's somewhere in the second paragraph. You can always go back and find it, or Command F it, which for reference on the LSAT you can use. It's not an actual Command F search function, but it's basically the same thing. They have a search bar. So you can always quickly pull it up and reference. Although we do know that there are things we consider in court. And according to our circumstances, it would appear that, at least from my inclination, these seem to go against the copy shop, because we know that they care about, are you making money? What's the nature of the copyrighted work? So maybe education would actually be in its favor, because it's not Harry Potter that are copy shop owners ripping off. It's education, and maybe education should be accessible. So it seems like we actually might have kind of oppositional forces. So then it will become what matters more. So let's see what the court says. They continue. In bringing suit, the publishers held that other copy shop owners would cease paying permission fees, causing the potential value of the copyrighted works of scholarship to diminish.
Okay, so and this is bringing it back explicitly to the case at hand, the recent court case. It's being argued that basically it kind of sets this bad example. Like if other copy shop owners see what this guy is doing, that he's just skirting the rules, then if we don't punish this, or if we don't, if as the publishers, if we don't, try to stop what this copy shop guy is doing, then other people are just going to be like, oh, we have free range to do this too. Free reign is the expression, but I always say free range to do this as well. We can just, also skirt the rules.
Right. Yeah. And that will hurt the publisher overall, which gets back to, I'd say, the work's potential market value, which is one of the things we mentioned in our first paragraph or second paragraph. So I'm like, okay, that is relevant. This could, I guess, cause a domino effect of the publishers lose their value. And obviously, you don't want to take this to its extreme. But if you did, then that would mean no one ever publishes anything and we don't get any more books. Obviously, pretty out there in terms of consequences, but you can see how this does matter.
And just so it's clear, so anyone listening just understands what it means when it says, causing the potential value of the copyrighted works of scholarship, like the works that the publishers are publishing. Obviously, if you have a bunch of copy shops copying these materials, then people who would want to purchase the actual version of it, the official version, are not incentivized to do so. They can just go get these kind of bootleg copies of it. And that's what they mean when it says diminishes the value.
Yeah, so that's their argument, which is, hey, you guys keep doing this, you're really undercutting us. Let's see what the court thinks. Nonetheless, the court decided that this reasoning did not demonstrate that the course packs would have a sufficiently adverse effect on the current or potential market of the copyrighted works, or on the value of the copyrighted works themselves.
Okay, so they're just saying that it doesn't actually show that in this case it would significantly affect. There could be an adverse effect, but wouldn't have sufficiently adverse effect on diminishing this value.
Yeah, they're saying it might affect the price somewhat. Like maybe you guys lose like 2% of your price, but they're not saying it's going to like crater the market and suddenly you can't sell your books anymore. So they're like, yeah, like, I don't know, maybe, but definitely not the argument that the publishers seem to be making, which is that this will just destroy the market. It's going to be terrible. We're never going to have books again. They're like, no, that's not real. And
yeah, because I mean, if you think about it, right, if we have this like one copy shop guy, this local copy shop, maybe there's a couple others that follow suit. But if it's some big publisher who's publishing, a high volume of whatever it is, how much of a dent really is the copy shop putting into it, or even, a couple copy shops?
Yeah. So let's see what else they say. The court instead ruled that since the copies were for educational purposes, the fact that the copy shop owner had profited from making the course packs did not prevent him from receiving protection under the law.
Okay, so instead, yeah, this is sort of the angle that the court is arguing. They're tying it in now to the nature of the work, right? Rather than like the market value. So they're addressing one of the other factors that we were told about in the beginning of this paragraph. Again, the nature of the work, which is for educational purposes. So they're saying, yeah, the fact that they had profited didn't prevent him from receiving protection. So he's actually, yeah, he's still, they're saying it's essentially compatible.
Yeah, they're saying even though he makes money, he's doing this for education, and as such, the education is a shield from these copyright attacks.
Yeah.
Which, okay, sure. I mean, I didn't know that's how it works, and that's kind of contrary to what I had thought based upon my reasoning. But the court is clearly saying that no, he's protected because it's education. So whether or not I agree that that's correct is totally irrelevant. I just have my opinion so that I'm understanding. But let's see. They continue. According to the court, the owner had not exploited copyrighted material because his fee was not based on the content of the works he copied. He charged by the page regardless of whether the content was copyrighted.
Okay, so I feel like they're just elaborating a little bit about why it being for educational purposes doesn't prevent him from receiving this copyright protection, because the material, the content of it doesn't matter. He's doing it per by page.
Yeah, he's
Um,
not charging more if it's the copyrighted textbook or if you're just printing out worksheets. It's the same.
yeah.
It's like it's 20 cents flat. I'm just a printer and I have these materials that you can print if you want them, but I'm not going to charge you any more than I would if you were just like printing out invitations to like your birthday party. Like it's all the same cost, which
Yeah,
it
he's
doesn't.
not like price gouging it because it's educational.
Yeah, he's operating at a profit, but he's operating at the same profit he would as if you were printing out flyers for like some event on campus, which I do think is a good defense of him, just from like a rational perspective. It's like, okay, so he's not trying to rip off students. He's just saying, hey, I'm a printer. If you want to come print stuff, whether it's course materials or flyers for your organization, I'll charge you the same price. Just come by. So,
Yeah.
all right, final paragraph. They tell us, in the court's view, the business of producing and selling course packs is more properly seen as the exploitation of professional copying techniques and a result of the inability of academic parties to reproduce printed materials efficiently, not the exploitation of these copyrighted materials themselves.
Okay, so kind of interesting because I feel like it does seem like the court is sort of um, like siding with the coffee shop, or he's saying it the business of doing this, it's he's just taking advantage of his ability to make photocopies, and it's instead a reflection of the academic parties, the professors and the universities, to produce it themselves and do it themselves. He's not taking advantage of the fact that these are copyrighted to have this like side gig or like side hustle going.
Yeah, they also seem to be kind of slapping the educational institutions on the wrist, which
Yeah.
I'm sympathetic to because I bought a lot of kind of nonsense course materials that I never used in my time in undergrad. And they're saying, hey, you guys suck at distributing textbooks and stuff. So if this guy, as in the copy shop owner, is going to come in and create a better way to give your students access to the materials that you guys can't figure out, we're going to let him do that. So
Because yeah, I
I,
think that and I'm sure again going to our real life experiences, like if faculty or universities really wanted to make it accessible, they could easily, I'm sure.
yeah, let's be real. They can just get a document and upload it to like Canvas or Blackboard or whatever
Yeah.
platform the school uses. The fact that they don't, like, I mean,
I
not
had a
to,
lot that did. I had both. I had experience of both, I
yeah.
think.
Well, I stopped buying my university textbooks by like sophomore year. I was like, they never require them. If I
Mhm.
need it, I'll just look it up. But anyways, that's besides the point. All right, final sentence. The court held that copyright laws do not prohibit professors and students who may make copies for themselves from using the photo reproduction services of a third party in order to obtain those same copies at lesser cost.
Yeah, they're basically just saying, yeah, like the professors themselves, like if they wanted to do this themselves, they could. So basically the copy shop is just doing it for them. Um, So it seems like they don't really see the problem.
And not to read between the lines too much, but it does seem like the purpose behind the copyright infringement matters. Because maybe if people were replicating this and then selling it, and the copyright owner was like enabling them to kind of commit infringement, that'd be one thing. But they're saying
Yeah.
they're doing it for themselves. They just want to access the material so that they can learn from them. And as
Mhm.
such, this guy enabling them to do that at a reasonable cost is really not infringing on copyright. He's just helping them get access to these materials that are like ridiculously priced in the free market.
Yeah. And I think that kind of ties back into when they said what he's doing in the beginning of the paragraph is more properly seen as the exploitation of copying technologies rather than like the exploitation of copyright materials.
Alrighty. Well, we've read the passage, and funnily enough, we've basically won the battle. One of the things that I'd say newer LSAT prep people often do is they fly through this and spend a lot of time in the questions. I haven't looked at the questions yet, but I imagine that Madeline and I are just going to crank through them based on our understanding. Do you do anything prior to going to the questions after you've read the passage, or do you just go straight in?
Not really. The one exception is if it is like a comparative passage, passage A and passage B, I might be a little bit more intentional about really like making sure I understand what is similar and different amongst the passages. I'm kind of doing this as I'm reading it though already in a comparative, but I think I might take like an extra beat just to make sure I feel good about, you know, the differences between those two passages. But otherwise, not really. If the passage I maybe found extra difficult or like extra dense, again, I might take an extra beat just to make sure I can really articulate the main point like in my own words and I'm feeling good about it. But again, typically I'm doing that on a smaller scale as I'm going. So by the time I get to the end, um if I'm feeling really good about what I've read, I feel good to go. I don't know about you.
Yeah, so I mean, it's funny that we mentioned this because we haven't done reading comp together, but I
Mhm.
always put the main point in my own words. I just find it
Mhm.
takes like 5 seconds. And if you would like
Yeah.
it, you probably should. I don't write it out. I do when I'm like in class or teaching just for per
Yeah.
just I did hear for those of us watching on video. I said that in a recent court case, the court ruled in favor of a coffee shop owner due to the nature of his replication, which is that it was educational and not charged by content. It's not about being perfect because often you do modify it slightly, but it will get you on the right idea. And I really use the main point as kind of my North Star for many of these questions.
Mhm.
I mean, often our author's opinion just aligns with that. So, and then also there's a lot of main point, like what's the purpose, what's the main point, etc.
Well, and
But
also because if we miss that, if we like, or if we have a misconstrued understanding of it, like we will get punished in the questions, or we will think that there is something being argued for or something expressed that's just not. I typically, what I often do, again, kind of depending on the passage, if I find it like less straightforward or more dense, I'm a little bit more proactive with this. But I typically, with each paragraph, at the end of the paragraph, will do like a small scale version of this. Like, okay, in half a sentence or so, what have they said so far? Just, it's more so for me personally to make sure I'm like not slipping into the zombie reading and I'm like still with it. It's like the analogous to, you know, moving your mouse so the computer screen doesn't go dark. I want to make sure like, okay, I'm still good. But I find them then when I get to the end of the passage as a whole, if I've sort of like been keeping up with how each paragraph is progressing, then just bring that all together and that is essentially the main point.
right, yeah, and it's like I've had people that do it that way. I think there's nothing wrong. I don't write notes after each paragraph, but I think to
I
write
don't write notes. This is all thought
oh, it's
exercise.
all
I don't,
mental. Okay.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
don't
mean,
write
I've had
notes.
people that physically do it. I think the big thing though is like we're not really highlighting, we're not taking a ton of notes. We're
Mhm.
understanding, and that's where the battle is won. So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
obviously, like Malin and I chit chatted a lot throughout this passage, but that is at least my mental process when I'm doing it by myself. Is it's not, it doesn't take as long because in your head's a lot quicker than speaking out loud
Yeah.
to another person. But we are having that conversation in our heads and thinking like,
Yeah.
what do they mean? What's going on here? Not just what are the words and zombie reading over them.
I feel like I have a whole dialogue, or I sometimes compare it to the example I use is if you've ever seen like on YouTube or TikTok, like those reaction videos, like so and so reacts to whatever, and like they're just giving their commentary. I feel like I'm giving like a reaction, like making a reaction video to the passage. Again, it's really goofy, but it's just all the things we need to do to
Yeah.
feign that engagement.
No, I love that. Reaction videos are great because I've never thought of it that way, but that's a great way to phrase it. So yeah, here on the first question, which it often is, not always, but often, they just ask us which of the following accurately states the main point of the passage, which we kind of, at least I made my prediction prior to even reading it. So Yeah, I guess Madeline, do you want to read the answers on
Yeah,
this one?
I'll read the answers for us. So A says a court recently ruled that a copy shop that makes course packs does not illegally exploit copyrighted materials, but rather it legally exploits the efficiency of professional photocopying technology.
Yeah, that feels like pretty much on the mark. I'm trying to
Yep.
think of anything that I dislike about A. So yeah, they rule in favor of the course pack creator, and they're doing it because they're just doing photocopiers. So yeah, I mean, I see nothing wrong with it. That feels right on the mark. And typically with the main point, I'm looking to get rid of answers, not to pick one. So not seeing
Yeah.
anything wrong with that. Like I could be missing something, or we could be missing something, but I doubt it. I'm pretty sure it's A here.
But of course, let's just read the rest just to be sure, because sometimes we make mistakes. So, B, a court recently ruled that course packs are protected by copyright law because their price is based solely on the number of pages in each pack.
Yeah, so I'd say
Okay.
this is accurate because they do rule in favor of the course packs. However, they don't say it's just because of the number of pages. We say it's also based on the educational content. So the number of
Mm-hmm.
pages are relevant, but it's not the only factor. And as such, that adverb solely modifies this in a way that is unjustified. So sometimes people have trouble with that, but one word can completely change the meaning of an answer, and solely does there.
Yep. It makes this statement untrue based off the passage, and we cannot have a factually inaccurate answer choice ever, including main point. C says a court recently ruled that the determining factors governing the copyrights of material used in course packs are how the material is to be used, the nature of the material itself, and the length of copied excerpts.
Yeah, I don't know that the court was making a rule about all course packs. They're ruling on this one specific case. This copy shop owner did this guy violate copyright law. And like maybe they'll use this as precedent, but C requires a lot of reading between the lines that therefore this is like the new landmark copyright case in course packs. And we don't know that. Maybe this was like one lower court case and they're just like, yeah, you're fine. So because we're saying the determining factors governing the copyright of these materials, we don't do that. It's one case. So C is making this way bigger than it actually is.
I think they're kind of misconstruing this idea. The court is appealing to these factors
Mhm.
that are involved in making decisions in copyright law, but they're not determining that like the court's decision is not to like solidify these factors or something like that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, C, I think is misinterpreting as if like this is some landmark case that we're gonna call like we'll be citing it in all course pack cases going forward. And we just don't know that. It might be, but Madeline says it in a great way, which is we're appealing to these factors. So these factors are there, but they weren't determined, they were appealed to.
All right. D, a recent court ruling limits the rights of publishers to seek suit against copy shops that make course packs from copyrighted material.
Yeah, I would stop reading just after seek suits or rights to seek suit. We don't say that they can't sue. We're just saying they've lost. That doesn't mean you've lost your right to sue. It just means you lost the court case. So
Yeah,
D
I
is
think it's really important to recognize we're really just given like a snapshot of one case. There's nothing in this passage about applying anything about future cases or, what would be happening going forwards or any other broader aims of this case. It's just this one issue with this copy shop owner.
yeah, exactly. And they often do appeal to like what the like I guess implications are of a decision. But if they don't
Mm-hmm.
say that, you don't want to read between the lines. And in fact, it's where a lot of I'd say reading comp mistakes come from is people taking the next step that is not said. And they don't want you to take the
Mm-hmm.
next step. They just want you to say what they said.
And then E, exceptions to copyright law are made when copyrighted material is used for educational purposes and no party makes a substantial profit from the material.
Yeah, so for one, we're talking about one case, and this is talking about all copyright situations. Further, substantial profit, we just don't know about. We know that our person is making a profit, but he might be making out. We know he's charging the same price, whether it's like flyers or course material, but he might have 90% margins on all of them. So whether or not he's making a substantial profit is not something we know about. And then further, he's very broad, and our argument was about one case. So I have a few issues with the E.
All right. So it was A after all, which we knew we felt really confident about. But just to confirm those
Yeah,
answers.
I'd also say on main point question, if you're ever struggling on one of these, it's a good gut check that like you had some work to do. These should be
Yeah.
pretty straightforward if you understood the passage. And if they aren't, That's okay, but it indicates that your problem is not in that question. It's that you lost the battle when you were reading. And that's usually the issue in reading comp.
Something I've heard people tell me is that they've heard from other people that they've been recommended to actually skip the main point and save it for the end. And I would disagree
Oh,
with that
that's so
because, like you
funny. Yeah.
said, like it's kind of a litmus test of do you have a baseline understanding of what is going on in the passage. If we don't know the main point, it's I feel like just downhill from there.
Yeah, it's, I mean, you just, without understanding, I mean, the section is literally called reading comprehension. You don't comprehend, which the main point is just like, what's the basic idea? Which I think is the easiest question if you read it critically. Um, you're basically lost on the rest of them, or at least many of them. I guess this question, well, because I'll do question 2 here. They say, in the first sentence of the second paragraph, the author lists several of the factors used to determine whether copyright material is protected by law primarily too. So that was,
This is
yeah,
actually exactly what I said. I was like, if they ask a question about this, I don't really care if we've memorized this, but we want to know exactly where to go back to. And they obviously are pointing us exactly where to go back to. So not even that cryptic. But it's all right there. This should be right in the text. Several of the factors. Oh, and then it's asking why they're mentioning this,
yeah.
though. But still, we should be able to understand kind of in our own words why they're doing this. I feel like
Well,
they,
I mean,
yeah,
just like a couple words. Do you have like so I always like to think through before I even look at the answers. I would just say like we're
yeah,
giving text here. Like what is copyright law? What do we operate based off of? I guess would you
yeah,
that or say it
yeah.
the same way?
I would say, yeah, basically they're just giving the legal factors at play in this case,
Yeah.
the considerations that are relevant
It's
here.
also important on these because just from I see A in the corner of my eye that you don't expand out to the whole passage. We really are just being
Mhm.
asked about this certain part of the passage. So A says demonstrate why the coffee shop owner was exempt from copyright law in this case. Why is that wrong, Madeline?
Well, I would say because it's not that this list of factors is why the coffee shop owner was exempt. It's they're discussing how these factors they go on later to discuss how these factors apply to the coffee shop owner specifically, and those reasons are why the coffee shop owner is exempt. It's not the list of things themselves. That's how I would think of it.
Yeah, at this point, all we're doing is just laying the groundwork, which we will then cite. And we do eventually get to the point that these point in favor of the coffee shop owner, but that comes much further. And it's also not these factors make him right. It's the application of these factors to the facts of our case.
Yeah.
So A is getting way ahead of ourselves. And also, that's just not what we're doing. B, are we explaining the charges the publishers brought against the coffee shop owner?
No, this is just not.
Yeah, it's how we evaluate the charge. Now, if that would be like, what are they claiming them? Oh, you violated copyright law 7B because you did it without permission. There's no charges here. These are rules and what goes.
I feel like this is a great example. Like, I feel like, again, if you understand your passage really well, half of the answers that you look at in reading comp, your explanation for why it's wrong is just this is just not what they're doing. They do not say this here. This is not the list of charges that are brought. That's
Yeah.
not. They're instead giving the relevant factors, as we said. And it should, we should not want to be tripped up by an answer like B.
Yeah, we're really not. Well, that brings us to C, illustrate a major flaw in the publisher's reasoning.
Somehow, I think this is even worse. Somehow, it's again just not doing that. They're not giving a flaw of the reasoning. There's no judgment in any of this. These factors. It's again really just background context.
Yeah, it's this very academic. Here's what the rules are. Not how do we apply them? Are they good? Are they bad? Just it is.
Hmm.
And I mean, D is also taking a stance, which is defend the right. But what
Yeah,
we're talking about, we're just saying, I mean, I'm not even going to read past defend the right. It's just
yeah.
not. We're just describing what is. And that brings us to E, provide the legal context for the arguments presented in the case. How do you
I
feel
feel like
about that?
that's pretty close to what we were saying. Yep, just giving that background.
Yeah, exactly. And for what's worth, I know we just spent, I mean, I wasn't timing, but probably 2 to 3 minutes. When Madeline and I are doing this, I would wager that we're probably spending under 5 seconds on this question because you just know what you're looking for. And also, I mean, I'm speaking for myself here, but I imagine you're a pretty quick reader yourself. So
Hmm.
not that we're trying to, it's also worth noting when I say we're a quick reader, it's not because we're trying to rush through the LSAT. It is a byproduct of understanding the LSAT. You just go fast, not because you're trying to, but because it's easy.
Something I get asked all the time in regards to reading comp is like, oh, how do I get, faster at like reading the passage, etc. I'm like, do you necessarily want to? Like, you're better off. No, you don't need to read it faster, just read it better. And if you understand that passage really well, the questions should really not be taking much time. Maybe there's like one annoying one that they're going to put, we always have hard questions lurking around, just because we're understand the passage extremely well, doesn't mean we're exempt from maybe an extra gnarly question or something. But by and large, the questions themselves should be pretty straightforward, assuming that we know what's going on in our passage. And I think the biggest issue that people have in reading comp is they go to the questions with either a poor understanding or like a superficial understanding, or it's just not as it's not understood to the degree it needs to be. And then the questions then become really time consuming because you're kind of ending up rereading the passage and just kind of, it feels like you're looking in for a needle in a haystack and combing through it. And it makes it time consuming. It makes it fatiguing. And I think this is where when people are like, I'm bad at reading comp, or I don't like reading comp, it's because that's how it's being done, which we want to avoid.
Well, this will be in the free curriculum that we'll have on our website, but I call it like the short-term hard versus like the long-term hard. It is short-term hard to actually commit to understanding and reading critically, but
it takes practice too.
Yeah, but it's way harder to keep spinning your wheels for the next year because you're just refusing to understand what's in front of you. And so if you keep skimming the surface level, and I'm not speaking to anyone specific here, but also maybe I'm depending on where you're at listening. It is yes, short term, you keep doing it the quote unquote easy way, but you're going to keep missing questions and you're not going to get to where you want to be, which sucks. I wouldn't want that for you. I'm sure you don't want that for you. So commit to diving in. It's really worth the investment. All right. Do you want to take question 3? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Oh, no, I'll go ahead and read it for us. So it says, the copy shop owner, as described in the passage, would be most likely to agree with which one of the following statements?
Yeah, so it's worth just remembering, what do we know about this person? And what I know about this person is that he thinks that he should be able to replicate the course packs. There's nothing wrong with doing what he's doing. So I would say that there's nothing wrong with making course packs. I don't know that we know too much more about this guy other than he makes course packs and he wants to keep doing so. He does give
some of his arguments in the beginning, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess we could go to what he actually says. We say he argued, as have others in the photocopy business, that the current process for obtaining permissions is time-consuming, cumbersome, and expensive. He also maintained that course packs, which are ubiquitous in higher education, allow professors to assign important readings in books and journals, too costly for students to be expected to purchase individually. I mean, I'd guess it's probably one of those two things if I had to, but.
Something I want to point out too about when they phrase a question like this, it's quite common in reading comp for them to say so-and-so, the author, the core, in this case, the copy shop, would be most likely to agree. It's not a vibe check. It's not like what would be on brand hypothetically for the copy shop owner. We want to have that support from the text. It may be more implicit, but we can't just make up something that would, in our view, make sense hypothetically be on brand, so to speak, for the copy shop owner. I think people see the most likely to agree and take a little bit too much liberty with that phrasing. It's really an inference question when it comes down to it. We have to be able to support the answer via the text.
Yeah.
A, so let's get into it. A, the potential market value of a copyrighted work should be calculated to include the impact on sales due to the use of the work in course packs.
It appears that's what our publishers think. They care about how course packs affect market value. I don't think our coffee shop owner ever cares about market value. So this is, I believe, misidentifying who this question is about. And as such, I don't like A because our coffee shop owner did not say that.
B, publishers are always opposed to the preparation and sale of course packs.
Yeah, a few issues. One, once again, I don't know that our coffee shop owner ever even addresses the publishers explicitly. Further, always, you have to support.
Always, yeah.
And we definitely don't say that.
In this case, I'm sure we know that probably the publishers in this instance are opposed to it, but we don't actually know if the copy shop would necessarily agree, probably. But again, the always is, we can't apply this to all cases.
Yeah, we really do need textual support for an answer here. So even if it's oh, that might be true is not the burden of proof, folks. It's what did they say?
C, more copy shops would likely seek permissions from publishers if the process for obtaining permissions were not so cumbersome and expensive.
Yeah, I like C. I mean, that goes right back to in our in that first paragraph, which I was taught to. We said he argued that the current process for obtaining permissions is time consuming, cumbersome, and expensive. So his whole reasoning for the reason I'm not doing this by the book is because you guys make it terrible to do it by the book. So instead, I'm going to circumvent you and just do it myself.
Yeah,
And
I think that implies that if it weren't so cumbersome, he would probably be following the rules.
yeah, he's like, hey, I want to follow the rules. You guys suck at your regulation. Hence, I'm just going to ignore you.
D, certain provisions of copyright law need to be rewritten to apply to all possible situations.
Yeah, double confusion. One, we never say rewrite the law. Secondly, all possible situations. We also don't touch on that. So
Yeah.
there's a lot wrong with D.
Not a great answer. E, copy shops make more of a profit from the preparation and sale of course packs than from other materials.
I'd actually say that's false because we even say that they're just charging by the page. That's
Yeah.
not what he said. That's what the overall fact said. And then further, he didn't say that. So like multiple issues. One, it's wrong. Secondly, was not said.
Yep. So C is looking like our clear choice, and it is correct.
Cool. Just got to clean things up real quick. And on to question 4. And they say, the information in the passage provides the most support for which of the following statements about copyright law?
Okay, kind of a broad question, right? Because I think copyright law is a pretty central topic to the whole passage. I think I would suspect, though, if I had to guess, that the support for the answer is probably going to be more towards the end because I think they get more into how copyright law applies in this case. Again, in that second paragraph, we get sort of the parameters of what copyright law considers. But I think a little bit more of a broad question than the prior one. But again, the answer will come from the text. It will be supported.
Yeah, and then further, often on these, I like to look for answers that are wrong because the wrong ones, we didn't talk about
They
that.
just didn't say it. Exactly. The wrong ones. Yeah, exactly. And all inference questions are most strongly supported questions in reading hop. The wrong one's wrong because it's wrong. They just did not say this. We cannot support it.
Also, for anyone who heard that, I have a whiteboard up there and it just completely fell. I did not command strip it.
I didn't hear it. So.
Okay, good. I guess Zoom picks that up, but the dog certainly heard it. But yeah, so let's see what they give us. So starting with A, copyright law can be one of the most complex areas of any legal system.
I just think that's way too strong. We don't know anything about copyright law in comparison to other practices of law. We just do not know this.
Yeah, maybe it's complex, maybe it's not. We just don't say that.
It could be the most chill,
Yeah, in fact,
type of law.
just from obviously you don't want to use real world perspective, but like let's be real. Copyright law versus like artificial intelligence or like IP or like securities. There's no way this is like the most
the worst they got. Yeah.
But that's also not the point. Like I almost shouldn't say that because what matters is we just didn't say that. That's what the LSAT cares about, and it was not said.
Yeah.
B, courts have been inconsistent in their interpretations of certain provisions of copyright law.
I just don't think we know this because we know the decision and the reasoning in this case. I think we've noticed this in several questions at this point where we do not know anything about other cases, past, or future, or anything. All we know is the reasoning in this case, the decisions in this case. And so we don't have enough evidence that would dictate if this is an inconsistent application because we don't know what typically has been happening or what will happen. We're kind of just given a snapshot of this one case, so we do not know.
Yeah, well, and I mean this is a really good point. It's like they often, this is very common on the LSAT, where I'd say they have a misunderstanding and it just keeps occasionally. I'm like, did I miss something? Like what's going on? But usually it's like no, they just didn't say that. But they know that often people will fill in the gaps, and I think they target these like common misconceptions.
Yes. I've noticed that too. And they'll just double down on it. Yeah.
Yeah, because occasionally I've been in class and it's like, am I fucking missing something? Like what's happening here? Like they keep talking about this and I could have sworn it was not there. Like have I been gaslit? And usually, occasionally I've misread something because I'm a human, I'm not perfect. But most of the time it's just like, no, they just keep seeing if you'll fall for it this time. And maybe someone falls for it on every single one and they just got 4 questions wrong because they just like took the bait.
I think a lot of times too, what it will prey on is our own external context. Like, you and I live in a world where this one legal case is not the only legal case we have ever
Mhm.
heard of ever, right? And so I think they typically like to take advantage of assumptions that we might make, but we have to,
Right.
turn it off and really just focus on solely what they've said.
And it is true that courts can be inconsistent from time to time, but not in the facts that we know. So it really
Yeah.
does. That's a good point. It preys on outside speculation, whereas these are closed record. These 18 sentences or however many there are is all that we care about. They are all that exists in the universe. You got to stick to what they said. But
Hmm.
let's see what C says. The number of the kinds of materials granted protection under copyright law is steadily decreasing.
Again, we just don't know this. I sound like a broken record in saying this, but it's true. We really are just concerned with these like course pack materials. They are clarifying that they are considering the nature of or the the educational purposes, that sort of nature of the copyright, but we don't know what other kinds of materials would be subject to copyright law. Is we especially don't know if it would be decreasing. We don't even know which other ones
Yeah.
would be technically.
Well, even like that's a good point. Even if we grant that the education has been taken away, that's a sample of one. And steadily decreasing means it's this
Yeah.
pattern that we just like maybe, but also very much so, maybe not. Which brings us to D. New practices can compel the courts to refine how copyright law is applied.
Mm, new practices can compel the
I'd say
courts
it's
to
broad
refine. It's
because the
broad. Nothing about it is like, ooh, I immediately want to just check it out. But I feel like I'd have to find the support for it.
I would say new practice. Often when it's abstract, I just like try to match things up. So like
I
new
think where
practice.
they talk about yeah, especially in the last paragraph where it's like, well, the copy shop is doing this because the university won't, right?
Yeah,
So it's not, is it a violation of copyright law or is it really just doing something that you as the university could have just done anyway and is just taking advantage of the, as they say, they taking advantage of the technology rather than like the copyright aspect of it.
yeah.
um
So I'm on board with you. I would be kind of like hesitant about D. I'd be like maybe, but upon my eyes glance and I looked at E, and I'm feeling very good about D after reading E.
okay,
So
because yeah, there's nothing actively
yeah,
problematic with D, and this is, and especially when we consider, time on the LSAT, if we look at E and E is just like also in A, B, C category of just sucks, then it's got to be D. Like, just what else is good? There's no F. Like, it can't be something else. So E, you wanna
yeah.
read it?
Yeah, copyright law is primarily concerned with making published materials available for educational use.
Yeah, we do not. Again, these are just way too broad. Like, we don't. In this case, we are discussing the
They
educational
make a sample of
applications.
one.
Yes, exactly. So we do not know that it's primarily concerned with this. So it's D because A, B, C, and E are almost comically bad. And
Yeah, they're
D, we
atrocious.
can see an angle for D, and it's fine.
Yeah, well, it's not. I always like an answer that's basically explicitly said. D is a very tiny bit of connecting the dots, but these other ones are straight up false, and that is a death sentence.
Yeah, I always, tell people the correct answer does not have to be the objective greatest answer you've ever seen of all time. It has to be better than the other four. That is the threshold we have to clear. All right, next question. Which one of the following describes a role most similar to that of professors in the passage who use copy shops to produce course packs?
Yeah, so I call these analogy questions, which is not real for those of you listening. I just say that for reference. And I find that they can be really easy or really hard depending on how much digestion you do prior to the answers. Because if you just go
Hmm.
straight to the answers, I think these look so confusing. But if you just take half a second to think about what am I trying to replicate, the right answer usually jumps off the page. So what do you think we're trying to replicate here when we have our copy shop and our course pack? What kind of relationship is that?
Because the professors who would use the copy shops
Yeah,
to
yeah.
produce the course packs, because it's not, in this case it wouldn't be the copy shop person doing it. They're specifically saying like the professors, I guess, going in and using it.
Hmm.
I feel like the idea being captured is that um, again, they're just sort of taking advantage of a technology rather than like
Yeah.
Again, exploiting the copyright aspect of it,
So I'd say,
and to make it more accessible or just to easily compile stuff for the
right.
classes.
So maybe someone who teaches some subject, probably going to be different because it's an analogy,
Yeah,
and they use some technology to replicate what they have.
yeah, and then presumably they might include this element of then distributing it to people that they help or something like that, but maybe not. So let's see. A says an artisan generates a legible copy of an old headstone engraving by using charcoal on newsprint and frames and sells high quality photocopies of it at a crafts market.
I think that could be analogous to our copy shop owner, maybe, because they're making
Mhm.
replicas. But our professor is not doing that. They're doing this for like educational purposes. Um, Further, like I don't know what the charcoal is. Like I guess that's the new technology. Is
I
like
feel
you
like
can yourself.
this
But
is
I
like
would
a
just
really
be,
niche craft.
yeah, I'd be inclined to just cross this off. 'Cause I'm like, okay, maybe it fits, but even if it fits, it's not our professor, it's our copy shop owner, and that's the wrong person.
Yeah. Also, for anyone, who would come across this question and reading it, I find myself kind of being like, what is this charcoal like headstone engraving? It's kind of absurd, but it's not about that. Don't allow yourself to get overwhelmed with like whatever happens to be the example that they're going with. It's not about the headstone engraving or the charcoal or whatever it is. It's about how it relates to the course packs.
Right.
B, a choir director tapes a selection of another well-known choir's best pieces and sends it to a recording studio to be reproduced in a sellable package for use by members of her choir.
That feels very on the nose because our
It
choir
feels,
director
yeah.
is analogous to our professor. The
Hmm.
selection of other ones are the copyrighted material of the publishers. The recording
Hmm.
studios are copy shop, and then they're selling it in the course packs or here they're packaging. So it's like,
To
I
the
mean,
choir, to their students, yeah.
yeah, that I can't see how it's anything other than B, especially this early because this is passage one. And little spoiler for you guys, passage one tends to be a little bit easier. They tend
Yeah.
not to have like very tricky. I mean, to be fair, reading comp tends not to have tricky questions to begin with if you've read it carefully, because that's the trick. You got to read carefully. So
I
you're like, no, reading comp's hard, but
I feel like B is almost to the point that even if for whatever reason you were kind of struggling to grasp fully what they were asking, or like you didn't really get your bearings with the relationship in the question stem, if you understood the passage well, I think it'd be hard to read B and be like, that makes no sense. Like if you understood the passage, it seems very similar to what was going on in the passage. But let's keep reading, of course. So
yeah,
C, a grocer makes several kinds of sandwiches that sell for less than similar sandwiches from a nearby upscale cafe.
I have no clue what we're talking about. This wasn't about pricing. It was about like making replicas to distribute, not like we're going to undercut Subway.
Undercut, yeah.
We're not Subway, but high scale. So no, we're talking about.
um, in fact, this is well, yeah. I feel like this is not, it's a grocer, but I feel like the undercut probably is the Subway, and then it'd be
Probably,
some
yeah.
bougie thing. um, D, a professional graphic artist prints reproductions of several well-known paintings at an exhibit to sell at the museum's gift shop.
So once again, if anything, that would be our coffee shop owner who's doing it for profit.
Yeah.
But even then, we're being asked to replicate our professor. So D is, I mean, even if you were replicating the coffee shop owner, I think A would be better. But that's almost like helping D out too much, which I probably shouldn't do. It's not about the professor, and that's the problem. We need to find something analogous to our professor.
E, a souvenir store in the center of a city, sells miniature bronze renditions of a famous bronze sculpture that the city is noted for displaying.
Yeah, I just don't care what they're selling with things. Also, how did you say that word again that I'm highlighting visually?
Miniature?
Oh, that's so funny.
How
I
do you
guess
say it?
I say miniature. I skip the I,
Miniature?
but I mean, there's all these like little
Miniature, miniature. I mean, I
the
feel like it's a rare word to say because we would say mini, right?
yeah, exactly. It's just I always get fascinated by pronunciation of various words.
I've never, oh God, I'm gonna overthink that miniature. No, I've definitely always said miniature.
Well, for what's worth, like I don't think you're wrong. It's just like that's not how. And you know,
Well,
this
again,
is
because I feel like it's one of those, like most people are not throwing that word around in their everyday,
yeah. Well, because like we all know like caramel,
vernacular.
caramel, which like caramel just sounds poor.
How do you say
Thing, but
Pecan, the nut?
oh, pecan.
No!
No,
Oh my
I
gosh.
did, but no, I'm joking. It's
I'd
pecan,
say
but
pecan. Yeah.
yeah, I know people do say that. So, anyways, we won't get too sidetracked with our pronunciation. I'm from Colorado, which that's a fun one. The state Colorado, we say Colorado. It's rad, as in cool, not Colorado, like a rod. That's wrong. You're false. So, if you ever know a Coloradan, you now know how to say our state properly and not like the non people. Anyways, total side tangent, but we don't have accents being from the Western US. We just speak properly. And well, you're not Western, but anyways, blah, blah, blah. Question 6. Which of the following, if true, would have most strengthened the publisher's position in this case?
Okay, so we have a strengthening question, which isn't super common in reading comp. I think we see questions like this a lot more in logical reasoning, but they're lurking. We have strengthen and weakens occasionally in reading comp. We want to be really clear what the publisher's position is, I think, before going into the answer choices. Similarly in LR, if we're trying to strengthen a claim, we want to make sure we know what the claim is, right? And have our bearings. I think sometimes it can be a little bit trickier in reading comp, depending on the passage. The position that they're asking about might not be as explicit. But I think in this case, it is somewhat fair, or not, is not too difficult to gather the publisher's position. I mean, they are obviously, arguing against the copy shop. They're appealing to the idea of copyright law, and they're the because the publishers, I presume, are like the plaintiffs here, right? They're the ones.
Yeah, and primarily, not only that, I would say they appeal to the, hey, you guys are going to mess up our market. If you guys keep selling our products, we're not going to be able to buy anything.
I think that they actually say this right here. It's like this, I think the second sentence of that second paragraph. Yeah, in bringing suit, the publishers held that either the copy shop owners would cease paying permission fees, causing the potential value to diminish. I think that's probably the biggest evidence of their position.
Yeah, exactly. So based on that, let's see what they give us. So A, course packs for courses that usually have large enrollments have produced a larger profit for the copy shop owner.
Okay, yeah, if there's that usually have large enrollments have a large
like a big econ 101 as opposed to like econ 404. So like maybe like a freshman.
Yeah, that it would be like, okay, there's a lot of profit, but I feel like this doesn't, their whole issue is like, oh, they're going to get all their copy shop buddies to do this too, and it's going to undercut.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think the size of the class matters. It's,
yeah.
Are they hurting the market? And
yeah,
like whether it's 20 kids or 80 kids, you're not hurting the market either way. You're still just providing educational stuff. So yeah, I get rid of it.
Yeah.
E, the copy shop owner had actively solicited professors' orders for course packs.
Again, I feel like it's not, first of all, is it like how many orders? What if it's like 5 orders? Like woohoo.
Yeah.
Also, again, the publishers are like, oh, like they're going to cease paying the fees, and or it's gonna prompt other copy shop owners to get in on this too and stop paying the fees, and then diminish the value of our works. And there's no element of that at all in B.
Yeah, we want to find basically something in line with what our publisher, or not our, what our publisher said with their logic. And B is introducing a different reason, like, oh, they're doing this on purpose. But our publishers didn't go after that. So you don't want to be helping these answers out because, like, yeah, if you spent, like, could you probably write 3 pages on how this might strengthen their argument? Like, perhaps. But we'd rather find something that's just right on the money, and they probably are going to have one.
Yeah, I feel like, especially because we see this position pretty clearly, I feel like we're just looking for an example of there actually being, like, a decrease in the value of, like, the official copies of the copyrighted work.
Yeah.
Or some, something that would demonstrate that their fear is actually occurring.
And that brings us to C. The revenue generated by the copy shop sales of course packs has risen or had risen significantly within the past few years.
Okay. This is interesting. The revenue generated by the copy shop sales of course packs had risen significantly.
Yeah, even still, I'm like, kind of like,
yeah.
Because, like, what if they went from 10K to 20K? Like, there's still not really a dent in the, I guess.
Just because it's like a relatively strong increase doesn't mean it's still to the point that it would impact the copyright works.
Well, then further, we didn't really go after, like, how much money they're making as a negative reason. We just said it's about, like, what are the reasons we say? Is it commercial or nonprofit? But not how much profit, just commercial or nonprofit.
Yeah.
The nature, the length. So, like, I'm just like, I don't think revenue matters here. D. Many area bookstores had reported a marked decrease in the sales of books used for producing course packs.
Okay, this is interesting because the bookstores, of course, are legitimate sellers, right? Of the, they're not reproducing it. And so if they have a market decrease in their sales used for the course packs, I feel like that does sort of suggest that these copy shops and friends, these new ones who would see like, oh, look, we don't, have to pay the fees. We're just going to also kind of copy these, is actually affecting the business, is diminishing the value
Yeah,
of
exactly. Like this speaks,
copyrighted works.
it speaks right to their reasoning, which is, hey, you guys are
Yeah.
hurting your value by making this public, so you can't do it. And the court said, no, actually, they're not. But then do you say, no, actually, they are. Actually, these course packs are completely undermining our market value. So where
Hmm.
you could maybe twist these other ones into being strengtheners, D speaks exactly to their logic. And when we can speak to their
Hmm.
logic, that is best. And then finally, E says the author had enlisted the support of the authors to verify their claims that the copy shop owner had not obtained permission.
And the publishers had enlisted the support of the authors to verify that their claims had not obtained permission. Okay. We already knew, though, they hadn't obtained permission. I feel like we're concerned with the consequence of that rather than whether or not they did or didn't do it. This is just saying, like, oh, we just fact check that they didn't obtain permission. Okay, great. But like,
Yeah.
is that going to impact our market value or not? It's not addressing the position at all.
Well, also, I don't think the court cares. I don't think the court cares about permission. They're acknowledging that it doesn't really matter. What they're
Hmm.
saying, though, is that's irrelevant. What we care about is what are they doing with it? Are they hurting your, I guess, value, or are they,
What
yeah,
is
I guess,
the impact
market
of it?
value? Yeah. So I would go with D there and feel pretty good about it after, like,
Hmm.
because could you twist A, B, C, or E? Like maybe, but then D is just what they said, and as
Yeah.
such, much stronger. Alrighty. If you enjoyed what we talked about today or learned something new, please leave a review or a rating. It really does help us out and helps us reach more people. If you have a question or anything you want talked about in the world of LSAT or law school admissions, you can always email support@heyfuturelawyer.com to get it in the podcast agenda. Just put podcast in the subject and we will talk about it on the show. Alrighty, that's all we have for today. So I will see you all next time.